At this time, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So Regina Mayor serves as National Sector Leader for Energy, Natural Resources and Chemicals as the America's Oil and Gas Leader in both capacities. She helped determine the strategy and the investment for the firm to better serve the energy industry. Regina has almost 25 years of delivering large-scale business and technology changes to major oil companies around the world, and she's provided advisory services across the entire value chain. She's a sought-after speaker. She's a lot of fun, by the way, to hang out with, so get to know her after. She's served as an adjunct professor at Rice's University of Jones Business School, and she was born and raised in Pearl City, Hawaii. Please welcome to the stage, Regina Mayor.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here with all of you, and I'm privileged to have this opportunity to speak to everybody today. Those of you that are online as well, and all of you that are here in the auditorium with us this morning. So welcome.
Here you go.
I want to talk to you. Thank you, Katie. That's a great job.
Thanks.
Love that picture of the oil can. I've fallen and I can't get up. I need to reuse that. I want to talk to you this morning about what diversity and inclusion is, the different frontiers that we need to face, why it's important now, and share with you some ideas on how we as a community can improve diversity and inclusion and leverage that to our advantage within this industry. But before I started, I wanted to share with you a story about one of my first experiences with institutional diversity programs. It's the summer of 1987. I'm somewhere between the age of 10 and 20. You guys can kind of figure out the math later on. Closer to 10 than 20, but I was a cadet in a U.S. Army Reserve Officer Training Program at Cornell University. And I was one of only 2 cadets that were selected to go to Fort Benning, Georgia, and learn how to jump out of airplanes. It was a tremendous honor, incredibly physically challenging. And this was back in the day, long before women were even allowed in combat types of positions. So a lot of my colleagues at Cornell believed that that was a wasted position to let a woman go to jump school when she's never going to have to use it in real life. I wanted to go because it's one of the few badges that you're allowed to wear on your uniform at any time, in any situation, in any circumstance. And I thought, well, that would be a really terrific way to be able to present myself as somebody different. I get that I'm relatively small in stature. And when I show up in my Army uniform, I might not garner the respect that some of my colleagues might. And the badge is right there that proves that I went to airborne school. So off I go to Fort Benning, Georgia. Is that me? Do I need to stand somewhere else? Oh, okay. Move over here. Okay. So off I go to Fort Benning, Georgia. And it is an experience. It's a 3-week program, and you spend basically 2 weeks getting brainwashed as to why you would want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And you're working on getting physically fit, and they're training you, and you're not allowed to walk anywhere, you have to run. You're not allowed to chew, you have to swallow. You are not allowed to rest. You get up at 4 a.m., you go to bed at 11 p.m. I mean, it's absolutely intensive. I learned how to push Georgia closer to sea level. I learned how to do the dying cockroach, which I'll maybe demonstrate at some point with a few glasses of wine. But a great experience. Out of several hundred students, there were only about 15 women, and we stuck together like glue. It was a really tremendous group of ladies that I got to know. Come the 3rd week, this is finally, you're going to throw yourself out of a perfectly good airplane. And there's a lot of hurry up and wait. You got to wait, make sure the cloud ceiling's okay, and there's a lot of us, and you jump 10 at a time, so it takes a lot of runs over that drop zone before you get everybody out of the airplane. But finally, it's our moment. We're sitting on the plane. It's our very first jump. We're squished together like sardines. We're so excited and terrified. We're about to jump out of this airplane, what we've been working on for weeks and weeks and weeks, it seemed like. The sergeant comes down the line. He pats us all on our helmets, gives us our jump order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like 1, 1, 1? 1? Why am I first? I'm like the only girl here. All the guys around me, switch places with me. Stand up, just switch places with me. You can be number 1. Why would I be number 1? Oh, Mayor, Sergeant Airborne said, you're number 1. You're the one that has to jump out first. Now, there's a big difference between jumping out first versus 5th or even 10th. You see what you're doing. You see that ground far below you rushing by. You're standing in an open doorway of a flying airplane. If you're in the back, you're looking at somebody's back. You shuffle to the door, you're out the door of that plane. You really never knew what hit you until you get caught in that jet wash. So I'm standing there, shaking like a leaf, trying to keep it together. There's a sergeant standing there. He's kind of doing this to me because, of course, you can't hear. And there's a stoplight, red, yellow, green. You just like, God, don't turn that to green. I don't want to do this. Why am I here? I'm going to die. Thank you, Mom, for everything you've done for me. But anyway, red, yellow, green. He says, smile, you go. And I made it. I landed. I'm here to tell about it. I lived to tell about it. I survived. And everybody after me, all the guys, were back on the bus, were like, oh, that was the best fun you can have, you know, blah, blah, blah. I won't finish that phrase. But then they said, well, I knew I had to go when I saw Mayor go. You know, she goes, oh, I got to go, right? So we go back to the barracks, and I asked my girlfriends, right? Because all of us were separated. None of us were on the same plane. You never saw them until you got back to take a shower and prepare. And of the 15 of us that were there, 14 of the 15 jumped first. This is the U.S. Army in 1987. Their motives might have been suspect, but they understood the importance of diversity in leadership. And I take that lesson with me every day, right? So I learned a lot about myself. I had to jump 4 more times. Again, survived, lived to tell about it. Will never, ever do it again. I'm not an extreme sports person. I'm not actually super athletic. But it was a tremendous learning experience for me. But thinking back on what the U.S. Army did in 1987 by having the women jump first and leading from the front, and what that did to motivate the rest of the students was a tremendously important lesson to learn. And I carry that lesson with me today. And I think it's one that we can continue to learn as members of this industry and leading from the front, and the importance of diversity, not just saying it's important, but what it really can do to drive a team and how we can work together. So I mentioned I want to talk about 3 things with you today. Diversity and inclusion and its importance, and what is it? Because I think there are 3 frontiers. One of them is relatively new that we need to start managing as we build our own diversity and inclusion programs. I do want to share with you some of what Kpmg has done. I think there are some useful lessons learned, and I'm very, very proud of my firm and the opportunity to be a leader within that firm and build the program. And then let's talk about how we can bring it to life within some of the energy companies that you represent, particularly given this very challenging commodity price environment within which we're operating. So diversity is proven to add demonstrable business value and results. You can see on the screen, companies with more diverse executive boards deliver 53% higher return on equity and 14% higher earnings before income tax margins. I mean, there's a proven component of the financial success. And I think all of us in this room, we understand it as well. You know, it's become more about this notion of diversity of thought, right? And less about just making sure that you have full representation, but this diversity of thought helps you avoid groupthink and helps you bring together multiple views to arrive collectively at what makes the most sense for any particular challenge or business problem that you're trying to resolve. And then inclusion becomes a little bit more of a squishy term. I've heard catalysts describe inclusion as it's the combination of embracing uniqueness, but also creating a sense of belonging. So it's the ability to recognize each and every one of us for the unique traits and aspects and skills that we bring, but then also making us feel like we still belong. I'm unique. I may not be a cookie cutter of the rest of you on this team, but I feel appreciated for what I'm bringing to the table. And why is that so much more important in today's world than maybe it even was back in 1987? And that sounds so long ago. God, I feel so old. It's because of the pace of technology and how rapidly those technologies and those demographic changes and the things that are happening in our world are disrupting and constantly changing the work environments within which we're operating. It's making traditional companies that have been around even just for a couple of decades, they're becoming obsolete if they can't figure out how to rapidly incorporate those changes, adapt, improve their business models, rapidly respond to changing consumer behaviors, and continue to be successful with the business that they're in. Some of the things I wanted to share with you about some of those technology changes that are really quite fun. If you've watched the Super Bowl, I'm a gigantic football fan, so I watched every second of that, and I actually rewatched it again. You saw the Amazon Echo that was advertised. That is the first true vocal computing device. It's not just something that's talking back to you, but it is a device that you can give commands to that will then execute computer programs to do all kinds of things. Buy Alec Baldwin some new socks when he comes home late from a party. The data that we're able to retain, 360 terabytes for eternity on a Superman memory crystal. And this is the one I love. I'm dating myself again, but I really wanted, when I was a kid growing up in Hawaii, a Barbie townhome, those, that had the little elevator. I so wanted that. I didn't. When parents could only afford the little plastic pool, that's the Barbie pool that I had. Mattel is piloting and will soon start selling 3D printers that will enable your children to kit out their action figures or their Barbies with anything they can imagine. Barbie wants a hoverboard, she gets one. Barbie wants a tiara, she gets one. That is game changing. Think about what our children will be able to do. So that's why diversity and inclusion is even more important in today's world, because of the pace of innovation and our requirement as successful business people to keep up. What do we get from that? In addition to great financial results, there's improved collaboration and teaming. We've got the higher performance, as I mentioned. And we are able to attract and retain the kind of talent that will enable us to be even better going forward. The ability for us to attract that talent, because success breeds success, and people want to work with people that they admire and respect, that they know will help them grow. And in today's rapidly changing environment, that is a differentiator for us in business. But we're not there yet, unfortunately. And we've been at this for a while. So that's one of the challenges, and one of the things I wanted to talk about today is how do we take it to the next level? Because we've known about these challenges for quite a while, but we still haven't closed the gap. Women, we've all known the importance. We make up half of the world's population, right? It's an important part of who we are. Everyone has a mom and a dad. They're both incredibly important to how they're raised and what they think. And we have had women outpacing men in college enrollment for 20 years, right? So that you can see the chart, 1994, 61% of all high school graduates were male. They went to college, 63% female. It's now 2012. Men entering college has stayed flat. Women have gone up to 71%. And it's consistent across, you see that change across ethnic diversity groups. You see that change across different regions of the world. Women are outpacing men when it comes to entering college. Yet despite having a qualified pipeline of entry-level employees, we continue to have a challenge with women in the boardroom, women as CEOs, women as executives in senior level positions within the companies. So even though I said 1/2 of the world's population is women. We hold just 16.5% of board seats, only 14% of executive officer positions, and only 4% of CEO titles for the Fortune 500. 4%. That's a big gap. And you can see it's roughly consistent. While the ASEAN countries may be doing slightly better, it's still just 1/3. And you can see North America is a laggard at 21%. So we still have a tremendous opportunity to achieve gender parity. Oh, it was fixed. It's good. All right, so there's another thing about me that people tend to find pretty surprising. I actually don't tell my jumping out of airplane stories very often. But the other part of me is I'm Korean. Yes, I know, the red hair, it's a total dead giveaway. I am Korean. I'm a quarter Korean by ethnic makeup, but I actually feel inside my heart probably 75% Korean. Picture on the left, as I'm showing it to you, is my great-grandmother. It's actually a woman, not a, whoop, I turned it off. Do I have a little pointer? Big button in the middle. Ah, look, okay. That is my great-grandmother. She's from North Korea. Can't go visit where her homeland was anymore. And she was what's called a picture bride. It's a version of a mail-order bride that basically came over at a very, very young age to marry a man who was much older than she was working in a plantation in Hawaii, and started a family. The woman next to her, this is my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. She's the youngest of 7. She's the only one that broke with Korean tradition and ran off and married a Portuguese man. So the big cultural thing, you don't marry outside of your race. So she was excommunicated for a while, but they loved my grandfather so much. And he's terrific, terrific man, looked like Errol Flynn, very, very handsome, that they let her back into the family fold. So my mother here is half Korean, half Portuguese. My grandmother and my mother both born and raised in Hawaii. My mother is the first one in her family that went to college, and not only she's such an overachiever, not only did she go to college, she had to get her PhD. So big shoes for me to fill. And this funky little curly-headed, pale-faced baby, that's me. So growing up, I really understood the importance of multiculturalism. My mom is the oldest of 4 girls. She's the only one that married a Caucasian gentleman. 2 of them married Japanese men. 1 of them married a Hawaiian. So our family pictures are, it looks like the United Nations has gotten together. And there's me, freckle-faced, red hair. One of these things is not like the others. But it instilled in me at a very young age the importance of multiculturalism and the importance of racial tolerance. I mean, growing up in Hawaii as a white kid, we got a lot of reverse discrimination. You're just different. You just kind of stick out. You don't seem like everybody else. But it teaches you a lot. It also created, I think, for my children, the worst type of form of mom that they could possibly have, because I'm the combination of a tiger mom and a helicopter mom. So there's just no help for them. But I wanted to share that piece with you, because even though it doesn't show on my skin, it is definitely a key part of my heart. And growing up, there were a lot of the Korean traditions that we followed. And then, the Hawaiian traditions, and just living in that kind of a melting pot made me very comfortable and very aware of multiculturalism. And then I had to show my uniform. This shirt, there's my airborne badge, if you can see in the corner. This shirt, this was Veterans Day of this year. This shirt is my actual uniform shirt. So that's how old I am. They have way cooler uniforms now. These things were so hot and heavy. And I was wearing that in the parade, and one of my friends on Facebook was like, God, that's such a cool jacket. What Army Navy store did you get that from? Like, yeah, okay, Claire, that's my uniform. Okay, so let's talk about multiculturalism. This industry in particular, tremendous for multiculturalism. Kpmg, for ourselves, we have 174,000 people globally. We operate in 155 countries. There's only 196 total. We operate in 155. one of the things I've loved about serving this industry is that same level of multiculturalism. We just pulled some publicly available data to show where some of those companies operate today and the broad geographic footprints that they represent. The other phenomenon that we have had, because it's not just finding and extracting hydrocarbons and it's not just serving those companies where they are, but we've had this major push around creating centers in emerging countries and building transaction processing facilities in places like Buenos Aires or Manila or Guangzhou, China, and that has been a key part of this industry's footprint. So this industry has dealt with multiculturalism for quite a long time. I think we still have tremendous opportunities to do a better job at it, but it's an inherent part of who we are within our industry. And then the last frontier that we need to cope with when we think about diversity and inclusion programs is the generational challenges. It's not that generational differences are new. They're not new. But what I think we're going to find in today's world is that we're going to have so many generations working together at the same time. That's going to create lots of opportunity to figure out the magic of what each generation brings and being tolerant and inclusive with those different generations. So the slide behind me, you can laugh. Yep, we're getting older. Adult diaper sales skyrocketing, baby diaper sales declining. The other phenomenon is the amount of younger people, right? Our model's always been built on, you've had a surge in the workforce of younger people that support our aging generation. But we're getting older, we're living longer, and there are fewer younger people that can then continue to sustain that. So that chart on the right is a very important one. In 2000, there were roughly 8, so 7.7 workers between the ages of 20 and 64 to support. So for every one person that was 65 or older, there were 7.7 between the ages of 20 and 64 to support them. But it is projected that by 2050, that ratio is going to be cut in half, and there's only going to be about 3.5 younger workers to support every person that's over the age of 65. And this is a global phenomenon. It's not as though you could say, oh, it's a Western world phenomenon, but you can see China and other parts of the world, this is a world number, will experience the same phenomenon. In addition, one of the things that's exciting about the millennials, amongst many things, is they're the most diverse generation that we've seen. So you can see that the non-white line between ages 18 and to 34 is increasing, and the white non-Hispanic line is coming down, and it's expected to reach convergence in 2043. So it's the millennials that are coming in will be one of the most diverse populations in history. Okay, so forgive me for a minute. I'm going to make some generational stereotypes. And I'm a Gen Xer, right? We're sandwiched between the baby boomers and the millennials, and nobody talks about us. So forgive me for a minute to just make some observations, because I'm fascinated by the generational differences, and you can see it, right? The greatest generation versus the boomers versus the Gen Xers versus the millennials. There are things that we all experienced that shaped who we are, that make us different from each other in a positive way, and in a way that we just need to work together to understand and embrace. So the millennials, they experienced 9/11, as very, very young children, and watched America come under attack. They have the highest debt levels of student loan debt of any previous generation, $1.1 trillion worth of debt. Their parents, generally speaking, were like me, the baby boomers. There was the rise of divorce rates were coming up, so families and the family structure started to change. So there's the rap that the Gen Xers, who often went through divorce, are heavily invested in their children, creating the helicopter mom phenomenon. And I have a 17-year-old, and I get it. I mean, I do everything for this girl. So the millennials tend to have that kind of experience. So they prefer experiences over things. They'll prefer to spend their money on a good meal or a concert or jumping out of a perfectly good airplane or going on a trip as opposed to buying a Louis Vuitton or a Chanel handbag, right? They're not as interested in owning cars and the status symbol that cars provided to perhaps my generation. And they're more interested in Uber and the sharing economy and those types of things. So there are some very important differences. There's a great statistic that while we were doing the research on this, we turfed up. Millennials drink half of all the wine in the US. Half! I love that. Let's raise a glass. Here is another statistic that I absolutely love. 40% of all millennials, surveys are always good, but this was a wonderful one. They don't eat cereal anymore because they don't want to do the cleanup. So it's something you can eat and it's in your hand. And so they're doing things like they're delaying household formation. They're spending their money on experiences. They're boomeranging back to their parents. They're teaching their parents technology and their ways of thinking. And I think there's just some fundamental demographic shifts that we're going to experience. And I think one of the things that the millennials bring to the table, they're just going to work differently than the rest. There's no such thing as paying your dues if you're a millennial. I mean, I don't live to work, I work to live. And I think some of those types of things are just going to be phenomenally beneficial for our workforce. We just need to figure out how to make that all happen. And they are projected by 2050 to represent half of the total workforce. So it's coming. Now let me segue and talk about, so what do you do about that? You got these three frontiers. We've been at it for a while: gender parity, multiculturalism, multi-generational, working together. How do we then bring that to taking that to the next level so we achieve the benefits of having truly diverse and truly inclusive workforces? I'll share a little bit about what Kpmg does. We have a number of programs. This is one of the things I love about the firm and my ability to be a partner there. I actually sit on our diversity advisory board. I co-chair our veterans network. Now, yes, I jumped out of airplanes, but I never considered myself a veteran. I was never on deployed. I didn't go to Iraq or Afghanistan. I didn't even go in the first Gulf War. Some of my colleagues were graduating, and Panama. You guys, I'm dating myself again, but General Noriega, and they were playing rock music outside of his house. I had friends that were deployed in Panama, and that was part of the conflict that they were at. But I believe now, as the co-chair of our Veterans Network, that this is how I'm giving back. Because heaven forbid we repeat the mistakes of when the Vietnam War veterans came back, and there's just a whole population of veterans that are not achieving what they could achieve, and the social structure is broken down. So corporate America and many social organizations today are focusing on veterans and that great wave of talented people who are coming from the different conflicts that we've had in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and figuring out how to take advantage of that talent pool and integrate them. So Kpmg places special emphasis on affinity networks, and we give time to people to participate in those. We actually do leadership development programs within those networks. And we do quite a bit of client outreach and interfacing with our clients around those networks. I had the pleasure of hosting our AIM network, which is our Abilities in Motion network, with our Veterans Network at an offsite for 70 of our high potential performers to do a 2-day leadership program. And it was one of the most gratifying things that I've ever gotten to do. And we took them to San Diego. The firm invests money in doing that. So developing those careers, giving them the leadership skills, having us focus those networks on the whole life cycle, recruiting through career progression, through retention, and helping them to deal with all the different milestones that they have in their life, the lifespan in their career. So we have 140 chapters for all of the diversity networks across our US firm, and we have 40% of our employees that are engaged in those. And let's just talk about women for a minute. Kpmg is taking the plunge to be a global founding sponsor of Pink Petro. And I still remember the day I met Katie Maynard, too. I think everybody probably has. Do you remember the day you met Katie? She came to our Global Energy Conference and was at my women's breakfast, which we do in conjunction with the Women's Energy Network. And handed me your card, which was the coaster, and I knew I liked her already, and told me the story. And the more we thought about what Pink Petro brings, it's the trifecta of the three things that we're trying to deal with, right? It's focused. Yes, it's for men and women, but it is focused a lot on the gender parity opportunity. It's going to be a global platform, and it could help us reach our folks in our 155 countries. And because it's social networking, it helps us deal with the multi-generational. So we are founding sponsors. I think our logo will start to appear a whole lot more. We're really excited about helping to make this a truly global platform and get this type of forum all over the world, because we see it as hugely beneficial for our business as well as our own professionals that are serving the industry. So we do quite a lot of things for our women. We have leadership summits. We've made a very explicit investment in women corporate directors, which is all about getting women onto public company boards. We've got a global sponsorship for that particular forum. We just launched the Kpmg Women's PGA Championship, and what was different about that is we had a 300-person women's leadership summit on the day before the tournament started. And that was just terrific, because it had NBC, the PGA and the LPGA, and the Kpmg and our Kpmg clients there. And women that, the senior folks from the LPGA and the PGA look a lot different from the senior accounting types that we are, look a lot different from Kate Snow, who's on NBC today. So it was a really interesting and eclectic mix of people. But when you look at sports, media, and corporate America, there was so much overlap with what our challenges were and how we need to mentor and build the next generation and pull each other up to be successful. So lots and lots of different kinds of experiences for women. And we track our success. We've had a great track record. You can see some of the statistics behind me. 59% of all of our new hires are women or ethnically diverse candidates. And women and ethnically diverse candidates accounted for 60% of our total workforce. These are US-based numbers, by the way, so we're not taking credit for our China office. So then that's ethnically diverse and women. When we just look at women, women accounted for more than 45% of all our full-time of our experienced hires. I personally am an experienced hire to Kpmg. I came in as a partner. So we work really hard at making sure it's not just the women coming out of the college and degree programs, but the women that we're attracting from other professions. And on our board, we have our own board, and it's an important part of our governance model. Almost 25% of our board are women. So we've made tremendous strides. The one blemish on our record, and the one that we're still intractably focused on, because we can't seem to move the dial, is only 19% of our partners are women. And it has stayed flat. And it's pretty consistent across the big four. We've all been roughly at 20%. We set the goal of wanting to be 30, but there's so many choices that our women are making as they progress in their careers. Getting them all the way through to the partner model continues to be a challenge. So we're still working on that. But let's talk about what that means for today, because Katie showed the I've fallen and I can't get up, and it's a significant challenge for the energy industry, one that we really need to try to face. Okay, so we've all talked about the great crew change, and I think Katie in the video talked about the 80s and what we did. We stopped hiring, so we created this challenge for ourselves with this camel-shaped hump, right? A big hump of folks, and then nobody got hired, and then a big hump of folks. So you've got, in some cases, 10, 15, even 20 years gap between your most experienced professionals and your more junior professionals. Some of the statistics that have been shared with me from other oil companies, where they will say 50% of their workforce has less than 5 years experience with that company. Doesn't mean it's less than 5 years experience overall, but less than 5 years experience with that major oil company, which means they're relatively new. They got to build that culture. They have to integrate it. Some of these statistics, 50% of the workforce is eligible to retire in the next 5 to 7 years. And frankly, some of those retirements are accelerating, given the commodity price cycle that we're down. And this was an interesting statistic too, 2 people will retire as one new employee joins the workforce. So the time is now to be able to deal with this tremendous challenge and this tremendous turnover as we want to build diverse and inclusive workforces, but we still want to retain what's good about us, and we want to be able to innovate, and we want to survive as a going concern. So lots that we have to deal with. I would put forward that the industry really needs to learn its lesson from previous downturns. Over the last 40 years, the price of crude has dropped by more than 33%, 4 times. Okay, so we've been here before. We know what this feels like. I myself am in the market for producing wells in East Texas. So if anybody's got some oil wells that they're ready to sell me, I'm in as Regina's oil company. Now's the time to buy. You know, for heaven's sake, I believe in this industry. I know it's going to come back. So the smarter companies are not abandoning their campus efforts. You know, they're not saying, okay, I'm not going to take those interns. They're not saying I'm not going to hire those professionals. I'm not going to disproportionately go axe the one-year grads, like poor Katie got 1 year in. Here's your box. So no severance. So that's probably why you aim at the younger ones. They have less benefits, right? So, but that is not the smart thing to do. So, you know, my pleading remark to this group is, let's be sensible. Let's not create the hump that we're dealing with today, and let's recognize that now is the time to retain your highest performing and your best talent, because the industry is going to come back, and frankly, you need that great brain power and those great work ethics and that great collaborative spirit to get you through this down cycle. Unfortunately, some of the studies that we've shown is there remain opportunities to better manage people during this downturn. Some of the companies, I know, you know, what's the first thing that got cut? Discretionary spend, no training, no travel, right? Yes, I understand, but there are cheaper ways to do the training. You still want to pull your people together. You still want to show that you're investing in them for the future, because the minute the market comes back and they have options, they'll vote with their feet if we're not taking care of them and making them a part of that. And then the study that Kpmg did with RigZone of over 2,000 professionals across the industry, 74% of the respondents said their companies are putting in a less than average investment in them right now. And I had the opportunity to speak at a Noble Energy forum a few weeks ago, and I applauded the CFO and the leadership team, because it didn't cost them a lot. It did take everybody out of the workforce for a day, but they still got everybody together. They talked about the opportunities that this down cycle creates, how to better manage your career through this down cycle, and showed they were still making investments in their people. Doesn't mean that you have to have a Christmas party where Adam Levine and Maroon 5 perform. There is an oil company, I won't name names. But right, you still need to continue to develop your teams and your people. And this is all publicly available information, so this is Regina's caveat. This is not because I think BP is doing a superbly excellent job, but I wanted to share a few examples of how oil companies now are sharing their results, and they're making this a very explicit part of their strategy. I facilitated a forum last night that Catalyst and Schlumberger and Chevron spoke at. And we had the debate about, is there merit in putting forward these quotas? Is that the bad word, quota? But I think what Catalyst, the representative from Catalyst said was, what gets measured gets done. And if you're not at least setting some form of a bar out there that says, like Kpmg did several years ago, we aspire to have 30% of all of our partners be female by a particular year, and we're still, working on getting there. So in this example, right, BP is publicly saying in their public literature that they aim for women to represent at least 25% of their group leaders, and they're showing their progress from 2010 until 2014. Marathon Oil was another example. So again, I'm not saying I don't actually have inside knowledge on how they manage their diversity and inclusion programs. We just pulled these out of their public company reports because we think it's a very good example of companies that are at least publicly holding themselves accountable for trying to drive a diversity and inclusion program and sharing that with their shareholders, their employees, and setting a level of expectation that hopefully, they're living up to. So what's the bottom line with all of this? I think we all know in this room that it continues to be an opportunity and a challenge for us. And I think it's terrific that Katie has brought us all together, and all of you out there online, to help think differently about how we start closing some of these gaps, and we take it to the next level, and we build that level of collaboration and inclusiveness to help us compete for what's going to continue to be a very, very challenging, very turbulent time for our industry. So what are the 3 things that I would suggest you leave with today relative to what you can do differently? You have to improve communication and your workforce connection. There's another survey that we had access to, and I didn't put it in the slide, but I thought it was important to share. Most managers, and I won't say the percentages because I can't remember them off the top of my head, but most managers believe that millennials are most motivated by money. So if you ask managers of millennials, they're motivated by money. Couldn't be further from the truth, right? I see millennials shaking their heads in the audience. They're motivated by the opportunity to work flexibly. They're motivated by the kinds of things that they're going to be learning and how they're growing. And they're motivated by how they can socialize and the kinds of networks that they can build. Not money at all. It's quite a difference. So we really need to understand what those motivators are and what drives our individual employees so that we can then provide the right kinds of incentives and encouragement to help build their careers and help them grow and help them be successful. We need to embrace generational differences. As a Gen Xer, sandwiched between 2 giant generations, I embrace it on both sides. But I think one of the things that I find very fascinating is the millennial generation is much more inclined to take risks, which I admire. I'm not a risk taker. Yes, I jumped out of an airplane, but that was a different story. And they're quicker to move for different experiences. And so, in our firm, big corporate accounting kind of, there's pejoratives associated with that. They go, I can't believe she wants to leave us. She's only been here for 2 years. I go, let them go. Like, let them fly their wings. In some cases, they'll come back. They'll realize it was such a great place to build their career that ultimately they'll come back and they'll be even more evolved. Or they'll go somewhere and they'll be a client of ours, right? So I think embracing that fluidity and really better understanding how choices get made and how we can be supportive of those choices so that we have employees and relationships for life, not necessarily, they may not be our employee the entire time, but they're making different choices as they go. And then the technology, if Mattel is going to sell 3D printers that will allow your children to kit out their Barbie townhouse with everything imaginable that they can make for themselves, but just imagine where that's going. Some of the disruptors, right? What is the Uberization of your industry? We keep talking about that. How are you going to get disintermediated? Amazon is putting traditional retailers out of business, and they've actually signed up to become an official logistics company. Amazon Prime is running a pilot here in Houston, and you basically can order something, and it'll be at your doorstep in an hour. And I was talking to one of my colleagues who's a big user of this service. Like, Angie, what could you possibly need that it has to show up at your house in an hour? She's like, bananas. I go, get your butt off the couch, go to the store. I'm a single mom. I got a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. I'm not packing their butts into that car and going to the store. I can just go on Amazon Prime and bananas get delivered to my door. So it's all changing, and consumer preferences are driving a lot of that. So technology, different ways of working, the multi-generations, and our ability to communicate and collaborate will help us all make this industry so much stronger and so much more powerful than it is today. And I look forward to hearing your stories and getting to know all of you today. And so thank you for taking a few minutes to listen to me. I appreciate it.
All right.
I think we have some time for a few questions.
Is this on? Is this on? Hello. All right. So first of all, if you're online, we're having a small issue. It's called a user error. There are a number of you that cannot potentially see the screen that we're showing up here. And the solution to that is, sorry, I got like lots of technology going on here. The solution to that is to go full screen. Okay, so you can see both the speaker as well as the slides. I'm sorry, split screen. That makes sense if you want to see two things. Split screen. All right, so we've got one question here from the web, but before we do that, we're going to do a little shout out. So Sharon Nish says, oh boy, Regina, Army strong. Love your airborne school story. I am LTC 28 years, Army Reserves. This sets us apart. Army, women, minority, mom, civilian.
Go Army! Thank you, Sharon.
Hey. All right, the
I
next
love it.
question we've got is, all the way from Aberdeen, Marie Ladbrook from GE Oil and Gas. The question is for Regina. What gave you the strength to jump from the plane if you thought you were going to die? Good question, Marie. And do you reflect back on that particular moment when you were making tough decisions and need to find the strength to follow them through? Whether it's new work or new challenges, what inspires you, your courage to lead?
Thank you. That's a terrific question. So the biggest motivator for me to actually jump was how upset I knew my male colleagues would be back at Cornell. I took a slot, right? They wanted to go. They all wanted to go. And there was some haters and hate going on about, well, Regina can't use it, and why does she need to go? And so
haters gonna hate.
Spoken precisely like that, not kidding. They were. So heaven forbid I come back and I didn't graduate, right? Oh my gosh. I couldn't have lived with myself. I couldn't have lived with my colleagues. I was going home in a pine box with my wings posthumously given to me if I was going to do anything. And it got worse, actually. The first jump, I mean, I didn't talk about jump 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I actually injured myself on jump 2. So it was pretty awful. And but they caught me. If you are caught limping, they pull you. Like, you're not allowed to finish. And so there was a nurse, the 15 girls. One of them was a nursing student. They wrapped my ankle in the boot, and so it was kind of a temporary cast, if you will. So I got through all, and the fourth jump was the scariest, because if you died on the fourth jump, you don't graduate. True, very true. You die on the fifth jump, you graduate. So, I mean, I was just terrified on jump 4. I just had to get down. So it's probably more than Maureen wanted to know, but she asked. So I landed, and I was in the middle of nowhere on the drop zone. I could see nobody for miles. And so I jumped up. I took my parachute off, and I jumped up, and I went, Yahoo! Like this, like really just loud, and the exuberance was incredible. And suddenly I heard this voice behind me. He was like camouflage or something. He was like, Yahoo! You don't Yahoo on my drop zone, you dirty, nasty leg. Because that's what they called us. We were all legs until we're airborne. I mean, and I was crying. I mean, I was get down, do your push-ups. I mean, I just survived my fourth jump. What are you doing? So it gets in my face. He goes, where are you from? Go, Hawaii, Sergeant Airborne. Hawaii, Sergeant Airborne. Oh, it was just terrible. It was absolutely awful. So, I mean, that's what gave me the courage to stick with it, because I didn't want to disappoint my colleagues, my friends. I couldn't come home empty-handed having taken that slot. How does that then motivate me to make tough decisions going forward? Even speaking in front of this group, I'm like, well, I survived jumping out of an airplane for 5 times. How bad can speaking to 2,000 people on the web be? So it really, it becomes the barometer
You
against
kinda have
which
this-
all other tough choices get made. And nothing's really stacked up other than giving birth twice. So my 2 children.
Well, Regina, I was going to say, you do know you have something kind of like here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions in the audience? Questions in the audience? All right, here we go. State your name and your question.
Okay. My name is Beatriz Armendares. I'm from Venezuela. So being different, let's put it that way, what's your recommendation for minorities to, to fight against any type of, I don't want to call it bullying, but that difficulty, that resilience that we have to develop somehow. Yeah, that's what it is.
So thank you for that question. I don't claim to have, a silver bullet, because I think it's very hard. I mean, I remember, you saw how goofy I looked as a baby. Only a mother could love that face. And, I got teased a lot growing up. I was really pale and freckles, and, there's this phrase that they use in Hawaii called a haole, and it's not a nice term necessarily for people that are white, and it's like haole, So I think that still exists today. Maybe people aren't as aggressive with the bullying, like children can be, and children can be very mean. But I think what I've taken with me through that is recognizing the remarkable things that you bring to the table. I mean, you're wonderful, beautiful looking woman. I would imagine that you've got a ton of stuff that you bring to the table, and your perspective on life in Venezuela and how you probably grew up during the different regimes and how that's evolved and the things that you can bring into any sort of conversation, that's terrific. And then what I then do is let's embrace what's different about everybody else, because even somebody that looks as white bread as I do with the red hair and the freckles has a very different story to tell. So that's what I try to do is recognize that everyone is unique. They all have a very different story. And how do I get to know each of those uniquenesses and embrace them and bring them forward? But I also embrace, I got some swagger, so I would encourage you to have some swagger, right? You got some swag, and embrace who you are and make that difference special. That's, I guess, what I try to do is make my differences very special. Hopefully that helps.
Any other questions? Oh, wow, in the back.
The lady in the red jacket is not allowed to ask a question.
Okay, great, because I'm in heels.
Yeah, we don't want Katie running up the stairs. That could get ugly.
Thank you, Regina. I enjoyed your talk. Last night in the Catalyst Chevron Schlumberger event, 2 of the women said really how to start changing diversity and inclusion is as leaders making the step and promoting women.
Right.
To really step out and forget about the hallway talk about women hiring women and making that first step. How would you encourage women to be brave and stand up and make their leadership known? And I've seen you hiring many women in the energy group. So how did you make that first step and get over all that hallway talk?
Yeah, so it's interesting because they were talking about how in some cases they feel uncomfortable hiring women because they feel like, oh, there she goes again. She's biased against us. And I've never even thought about it that way. I like working with women. I like working with guys too, don't get me wrong. I spent a lot of time in the Army, and all my male colleagues, I love them to bits. But I think we have to give the women an opportunity. So I'm incredibly proud. For example, when I was the leader in our Houston office for consulting, at one point, 8 of our 20 partners were women. So we had 40% of our partners were women, where the rest of the firm had 19%. I think the most successful business developers are women. So I had 4 slots to fill, 3 of them got filled by women. So that I thought was a great lesson, right, Joan, that you just brought up, that we are responsible for doing that for the next generation. And unless we hold ourselves accountable, we just can't wait for everybody else to change if we're not changing for ourselves. And I do personally own that And I probably err on the side of being more biased toward women candidates versus, and ethnically diverse candidates versus the rest. But I think, I was going to get myself in trouble. One of my male colleagues was giving me a hard time the other day about the fact that I host a lot of women-only forums, you know, and he's like, if us guys try to get together, you guys never forgive us. I was like, excuse me, corporate America, by definition, is a white male affinity group, so I don't want to hear another word about about my little affinity group. And I think we just have to do that, right? So we have spa days and embrace who we are and the fact that we are women. And one of the things I love, I'll share one other story really quickly. When I started as a brand new consultant, I was working at Price Waterhouse. It was before it was Price Waterhouse Coopers, and there was a woman partner that had sued the Price Waterhouse partnership to get her job back. She successfully sued them for unfair being fired. I can't remember the fancy word for it. So I went to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, and we had just graduated, and there was all of us little Harvard girls, and we're like, oh my God, she's a role model. I just want to meet her. I want to talk about what her experiences were, how she had the guts to go sue the firm, get her job back. How did she show up at work? Because she was at work every day. Door slammed in our face. She had no interest whatsoever in sharing with us that story. And in fact, was really mad. Because for her, it wasn't about being a woman. For her, it was, those jerks fired me inappropriately. I want my job back. So I've learned from that too. And for me, it is all about telling my story, pulling people up behind me, and making this world a better place for the men and women that are coming behind us.
Any other questions? Let me look and see if we have anything online. It's all coming in.
Suze has one.
Time.
Suze has one here.
Oh, right here. Question in the red.
Hi again. So one of your statistics was that 17% of your folks participate in more than one affinity network. And being in the diversity field, we're hearing more and more about which affinity group do I belong to? Do I, in your case, are you part of the veterans group? Are you part of the women's group? Are you part of the Asian Americans group, right?
Go.
So what's your advice to those in the audience around, do they join one? Do they join multiple? And because a lot of times, like you said, a lot of them are leadership development based. So how do you get all the information you can and all the possibilities you can while not having too much overlap or too much overwhelm of trying to, get content?
Great question, Suze. I mean, there are a lot of synergies between the networks, and where we're trying to go is cross-network synergy. As the leader of our veterans network, many of the veterans have major disabilities, right? The IEDs and the limbs that they've lost. Many of them are we have a military spouse part of our network, and so they're caregivers as well. So, and then there are quite a number of veterans that are ethnically diverse. Not as many women, unfortunately, but ethnically diverse. So how do we partner with our Hispanic network and our African American network and our Abilities in Motion network to have something that's jointly supportive of our veterans? So I encourage people to join multiple. They could also be a lesbian or bisexual, right? I mean, the whole don't ask, don't tell, and so they could be a member of the Pride network, right? So we encourage multiple network participation, and as we evolve our networks, we are looking more for those cross-network types of opportunities so that people get the benefit of understanding all of those dimensions.
All right, so we have one last question from the web. This is from Kpmg. Oh, hello, Kpmg. This is one of our members in Aberdeen with LR Synergy. The question is there a line between getting ahead in spite of being a woman and a minority and getting through because of it? I'm a Black African woman, and I feel like it's been a greater challenge being woman in the industry than being Black. I sometimes resent the use of my uniqueness as a point to help me succeed.
It's a really interesting question and interesting perspective that she sometimes feels like it's being a woman that makes it harder, right? Wow, I love that. I go back to embrace who you are and embrace what makes you different. Haters gonna hate, right? So there's always gonna be somebody that'll say, well, she got there because of the color of her skin, or she got there because she's a woman. But you know what? I say that about some of my male colleagues, like as you said, not that he got there because he's a woman, but he got there because he's buddies with so-and-so. You know, that's so-and-so's boy, right? So I think we have to embrace who we are. We have to be confident and competent all the time. And we have to recognize that there will be people that will detract, but that would happen regardless of your gender or your skin color or where you come from. And if you're confident and competent and you show your mojo, you know, each and every day, then I think people will respect you for who you are, and ultimately that noise will fall by the wayside. We did have a conversation last night at the same event that Joan mentioned, where you put a high potential individual in a role, you really stretch them out, and you stretch them so far that they failed. If it was a guy, they'd be like, oh well, he'll pick himself back up and we'll help him be successful the next time. If it's a woman, it was like, well, she was too risky, it was too big of a stretch for her. I think we have to let go of all of our unconscious biases that drive that way of thinking. The Catalyst woman that was speaking gave an example of a client she was working with that wanted more women in plant operational leadership roles. And he kept putting forward, he was the CEO, kept putting forward women to lead these plants. And the guys were like, oh, look, she's a little bit too risky. I'm just not sure she has the exact right background. So he did a little experiment. He gave them 4 or 5 resumes that were their resumes, but he put women's names at the top of them, kind of disguised it a little bit. And they said the same thing. Oh, I don't think this person has enough experience. Really, really worried about the stretch role that this person is coming in. And he was like, seriously, guys, these are your resumes when you got put into these positions. It's very eye-opening for them. So I think it's about confronting that unconscious bias, and it's about us continuing to have that confidence and that competence that we demonstrate each and every day. So,
Can we give a round of applause?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome.